We're going to continue this series that Pastor Jason started last week on salt, and he gave me an idea of what he would like for me to continue with. And as I studied this week, I realized that I was going to have to pray a whole lot more to tackle this subject. Mark Twain said one time, he said, some people read the scriptures and struggle to understand what they say. He said, but that's not my problem. He said, I read the scriptures and I understand what they say. And he said, the struggle for me is to live the lifestyle that the scriptures tell me that I should live. And that's, I'm going to cry some today, so we just get our hankies out here if you want to join along. But that's the struggle that I find, is that even though I may try so hard, on my own strength, I can't do it. But let's get into this series that the pastor started. I enjoyed it so much last week. It's the key verse for this series about salt is found in Matthew 5 and verse 13. You'll see me flipping a lot of pages. I do have a lot of notes, but I told my wife when I started preaching several years ago now, I set the font at 10 and I could read it. And then it was 12, and it was 14. Folks, you can probably read this. This is 16 now. So I don't know, but we're going to go this morning. Matthew 5 and 13 says, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. Last week, Pastor Jason displayed the different types of salt that he and Zoe had purchased at the store. And I thought that would probably have been a pretty comical thing to see, he and Zoe looking for salt at the store. But he had the rock salt and the ice cream salt and the table salt and all different. I think he had some kind of Himalaya something or another salt up here. But he had all different kind of salts. And he talked about what their uses could be for and how each one had a different use. And I began to look at the characteristics of salt. And just bear with me for a few moments. We're going to get to where we're really going here in just a moment. But salt, here's one of the characteristics of salt. Salt is distinctive. It is totally different from the food or the object upon which it is placed. The power of salt lies in that very difference, that it is distinctive. Salt is a preservative. It keeps things from going bad and decaying. It cleanses and it disinfects. Salt penetrates. It inserts a new quality, a substance, and life. It changes the thing upon which it was put. He says we're to be the salt of the earth, then we should be making a difference. Salt flavors. It influences the taste of things. It takes a bland, tasteless food and makes it enjoyable. If you put too much salt in it, it can be the other way around. My wife I have her permission. One time on one of her recipe cards, she had written down a recipe. She couldn't tell if it was teaspoon or tablespoon, but she said, I'll go with the tablespoon. We tried to eat it, but it was teaspoon. And we changed that recipe card real quick. It flavored. Man, it just kept on flavoring. Salt is quiet. Now, I've never seen a salt shaker jump up and say, use me, use me, use me. I usually grab for it first. But it is salt is a visible thing, yet it works silently and makes no noise wherever it's doing its work. Though quiet, the evidence of salt is detected when it's added or applied to a thing. Think about that for just a moment. Even though it's quiet, it's still very effective. Salt spreads. Its flavor spreads all about. It enhances the flavor of seasonings upon which it's spread. It makes that thing that it's been added to that much better. It's kind of like Michael Jordan when he was playing for the Bulls, and they had won all those championships. Michael was the man, but he made Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant and John Paxton and John Kerr, Steve Kerr, and all those other guys that much better because he was a great player. Folks, as the salt of the earth, you have the ability to make those around you so much better than they are. Not because we're great, but because we have something, and if we will allow what God has given to us to minister to them, it can make the people that you work with, the people that you're going to school with, the people you're shopping with, better people and a better atmosphere because of the salt that Christ has placed in you. Salt is irrepressible. Once applied, it cannot be stopped, and its influence cannot be undone. It can't be undone. Notice that nowhere in this text, Jesus said to the disciples, he said, you are the salt of the earth. There's nowhere in that text that Jesus says you ought to be the salt of the earth, or that you should be, or you can be, or you might be. He simply says, you are. Whether we do it well or whether we do it badly, whether we intend to do it or not do it, we witness to Jesus in one way or another. Because he says, you are the salt. With our words and actions, our silence and our inactions, we let others know whether we believe what Jesus said and did and taught is true, because we are told we are the salt of the earth. What we know that salt does and what we understand and what we're to do to help others discover the joy and difference it makes is knowing Jesus. Our problem isn't in understanding what Jesus is asking of us here. Our problem is living it out. Or that's for me. Maybe you all have conquered that by now. But I know for me, there's times I struggle, Shelley, and I say, oh, man, would I really like to say something here. And Pastor Caleb, there's been times I've said something, and then I've had to get in the prayer closet and say, Lord, that wasn't you telling me to say that. It's kind of like, people watch your lives. They really do. And there's a story of a pastor that was building a deck on the back of his house. And every day he would go out and work on it a little bit, and the neighborhood kid would come by, and he'd just watch the pastor, wouldn't say anything. Pastor would go in. Next day he'd come back out, do a little more work on the deck. Same kid come over. Not a word, just watching the pastor. Okay, see you tomorrow. This went on for several days. The pastor would try to strike up a conversation with the kid. He said, buddy, are you wanting to be a builder? Nope, no interest in it at all. He said, would you like to be a carpenter? Nope, no interest in that either. He said, well, I can't figure out why you come over every day. Oh, he said, Pastor, that's easy. He said, I'm watching you. He said, I want to see how you react when you hit your thumb instead of when you hit the nail. He said, I want to see what comes out of your mouth. I want to see if you're full of salt or, Look at your neighbor and tell them you are the salt of the earth. The earth is our mission field, and it's the place that we're to salt. And with disciples of Christ, we're to salt the earth. Why? Because the world we live in now more than ever needs an influence, a good influence, a godly influence, because we live in a world, folks, that it's not easy to say it, but it's a rotting and decaying and corrupting and foul and bland and tasteless society that we live in. Our mission as followers of Christ is to salt the earth, to penetrate it, to flavor, to preserve, to be effective upon the earth. And we are to leave an effective, salty Christian footprint everywhere that we go. It's kind of like that guy that I work with that wears too much cologne. Our warehouse is about 3 times as long as this auditorium is. And when John's loading down at the other end of the building, I can smell him down here on the other end. And when he passes by to go in and get his computer in the check-in room, my truck, after I'm a mile down the road, still smells like it if John's got on my truck. It smells good, but he's left an aroma. We should be the same way when we walk in somewhere. Man, that guy smelled good. There was something about them that was different. They had a good influence on the area that they were in. There's 2 things necessary before we can salt the earth. The believer must have salt in themselves first. Mark 9:50, and these are from the King James Version. It says, salt is good, but if the salt loses its flavor, how will you season it? And here it is, have salt in yourselves and have peace with one another. We've got to have salt in us before we can salt the earth. We have to have something peaceable within us before we can be effective to the world around us. The second thing is the believer must spread out into the world. I say into the world, and everybody says, well, I can't go run a mission field. How about your neighborhood? How about your workplace or your school or the people you come in contact with? Mark 16:15, he said, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. See, here's our task, is to go and to be salty and to be effective everywhere that we go. Not just when we feel like it, not when we think, hey, I'm having a good day, I think I'll go out and bless somebody. But it's even on those days, Pastor Caleb, you were talking about rejoicing even when things aren't bad. We can still rejoice. And somebody can be touched by that and say, man, I know they're going through some things, and they're still rejoicing. How is it that they can rejoice? And the scripture says rejoice, and again I say rejoice. How can I do that? I can rejoice because I know that the one that I need to give me the comfort and the strength to make it through these situations is constant. He's with me. He's not changing, and that's why I can rejoice. That's why I can say, though these things are happening, still I can rejoice because He's constant. He's constant. There's the danger of becoming flavorless salt. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. Salt does not naturally lose its flavor. However, in the time of Christ, when in Palestine, when they were gathering salt they gathered salt in such a manner that dirt and other impurities often mixed in it. And then the salt was good for nothing. It was useless and destructive. It was the impurities in the salt that caused the salt to be rendered useless. So what is the number one contaminant in our lives? Anyone want to take a guess? Yeah, sin. Attitude. Oh, yeah. I know you all came with a real good attitude this morning. Here's a little food for thought. A friend of Karen sent this morning, and she said, Tim, you're not going to believe that they sent this and what you're preaching on. I said, so what is it? Judas had the best pastor, the best leader, the best teacher, the wisest instructor, the best friend, and he failed. The problem isn't the leadership or the church that you go to. If your attitude doesn't change or your character transformed, you will always be the same. You see, your attitude begins right up here in the mind. Why is it that Satan wants to play in your mind? Well, if I can change their attitude, they're going to be ineffective. Oh, you'll be effective, but not in the right way. You can affect somebody in a negative way just as well as you can affect somebody in a positive way. And I didn't read 50 books on the power of positive thinking this week. This is just from the scripture here. What is attitude? Attitude is a settled way. I did look this up in the dictionary. It's settled away of thinking or feeling about someone or something, typically one that is reflected in the person's behavior. Attitude influences an individual's choice of action and responses to challenges. Attitude is the servant that can open the doors of life or close the gates of possibility. With the right attitude, human beings can move mountains and become great leaders, touch lives in a positive manner. But with a poor attitude, you can destroy a life. You can crush dreams and relationships. Attitude is the prophet of your future. Attitude creates our world and designs our destiny. It determines our successes and our failures in any venture in life. More opportunities have been lost and withheld and forfeited because of an attitude more than any other cause. Let me give you an example. How many of you are sports fans? They have the NBA draft and the NFL draft, and there'll be some kid that thinks he's the next superstar in the league, and he's going to leave college early, and he listens to all these guys, Mike Golick and Greenberg, and the one guy that's supposed to know everything about everybody else, and he's always wrong. But he's always telling you where they're going to go in the draft and all this kind of stuff. Well, they all gather in Radio City Music Hall or some big place, Madison Square Garden, for the draft. They've got all these kids that they think is going to be the top 20 or 25 draft picks all gathered in a room, and they're waiting to be interviewed, and they're going to hear their name called and run out on stage, be given a cap and a jersey, and take a bunch of pictures and whisk away to sign a big contract. That's how it's supposed to work. And you get this kid, and all the prognosticators are saying, oh, well, he's going to be at least no worse than the second pick in the first round. That's just the way it's going to go. But what happens? This kid's all hyped up, man, I'm going to be the first or second pick in the draft. The first and second pick's called, and it's not his name. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and what's happening? I was supposed to be the first pick in the draft. What's going on here? And all of a sudden, all these guys trying to cover their, oh, he's going to be the number one. Now they're having to rewrite their script here all of a sudden, and, well, the rumors are start floating. He's a great kid. He's really talented. If he ever matures, he'll be a superstar, but he's got a problem. It's his attitude. And we just can't risk having that on our team. We're trying to build a team, and we think he would be a detriment. And so because of his poor attitude, he loses dollars. He loses a position. He's embarrassed because he was supposed to be the number one choice. But because of his poor attitude, he wasn't selected as high as he should have been selected. And the opportunities that he would have had for merchandising contracts and all those type things that go with the first and second picks in the draft, all of a sudden are lost. Why? Because of an attitude problem. A business survey revealed the following about lost customer base. And I can say, working in the field that I do for over the last 33 years, I've seen this play out with more businesses failing simply because of this. See where the statistics of why customers quit the shopping where they shop. 1% die. Well, that would be obvious. 3% move away. 5% stop shopping and start going to another place because their other friends are shopping at the new place, so I'll go there too. 9% quit shopping because of competitive reasons. 14% quit shopping because of product dissatisfaction. But 68% of people that change stores, 68% quit because of an attitude of indifference toward them by some employee. No matter how quality of a product they might have, many businesses are sabotaged by employees with a poor attitude. How many have ever gone to a restaurant, the food was good, it was clean, it was nice, but your waitress was having a really, really, really bad day? And even though your food was great, and maybe somebody even picked up the bill for you, all you remember is the poor attitude that your waitress had that day. And you'll say, I'll never go back until I'm hungry again. And then I'll go back. Attitude is the eye of your soul. Your attitude determines how you view life. And be careful about the people that you hang around because they can drag you down too. There's some people that the sun can be shining, they can have a pocket full of money and say, how's it going today? Terrible. That's just, there's some negative people like that. Attitude is the face of your life. Your attitude determines how you appear to others and your compassion or the lack of compassion. You see, the process of life can mold our attitudes. Sickness, death, loss, maybe a failed business venture. And we have to guard against becoming bitter when those type of things happen in our lives, because bitterness will breed hatred and negativity. And then what happens? We become ineffective. Our ability to lead is compromised because of a poor and negative attitude. I had a friend that was a manager for many, many years with a particular company. When he was hired on, he was thought of as one of the brightest minds, and they couldn't wait to get him in and get his feet wet, and he steadily climbed the corporate ladder. Department manager, special manager over certain departments in the zone, store manager, then a bigger store, then a bigger store. But over this time, his company began to change how they would do things. And he was once a very pleasant man to be around and very successful. His employees loved to work for him. But when his company began to do different things and he didn't agree with them and he would try to kick against their plans, he became bitter. And usually a man that I could go in and say, hey, good morning, mister, how you doing? He'd say, I'm doing great. But now I could go in and say, hey, mister, how you doing this morning? It's a great morning, isn't it? That depends on who you talk to. Good morning. Well, that's up for a vote this morning. What's so good about it? Well, you're alive. Well, I don't know if that's a positive or not. And his negative began to rub off on his employees. And his employees begin to have the negative attitude. And it began to be handed over and sensed by the customer base that shopped that store. And they begin to see sales decline, and other customers go to other stores surrounding that were a little friendlier. Even though it was a beautiful store, even though they had great prices, this manager with his negative attitude had passed this on to someone, who passed it on to someone, who passed it on to someone else, till they were running business away. They finally retired that man out of his position. What had happened? The processes. I didn't want to be promoted. I didn't want to go to take this store. I was happy right where I was. And he carried all that baggage with him. And everywhere he went, it was a smell. When he left this store and went to that store, it's kind of like, I don't know. God did so many things in my life this week, just small, simple things. And then I'd think, well, I could use that in that sermon. I was on my way to DuQuoin, to my first stop at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And there was a guy in front of me, and he hits a skunk. I thought, well, he nailed him, and I'm going to try to miss him. I didn't. But I thought, he's dead. That's not going to. And as soon as that thought hit my mind, folks, 26-foot route truck was filled with the smell of a skunk. I get to Elkville. There's a little baby skunk. He didn't know if he was coming or going or not. And I thought, this is not going to happen to me again. So I slowed down, and I tried to straddle the road where that little guy was. But he was so wound up and so nervous about a truck going to run over him. Man, he nailed me from one end of that truck to the other. So when I got to DuQuoin Walmart, even though I was in this metal truck and there was no access to the boxes, when I got in, I started opening boxes, and the receiver said, can we use this stuff? This smells like you put a skunk in every one of these boxes. So then I got the nickname, here comes Pepe Le Pew. He's the Frito guy. So everybody in DuQuoin had a big laugh. Hey, there's Pepe. There he is. I wonder what he's got in those boxes today. But I carried that stink with me all day long. And I told Karen about it, and she said, what did you do? I said, I bought some Febreze and car fresheners and hung in there. And I've left the doors open all day long. She said, what's it smell like now? I said, sandalwood and rainforest is what it smells like. He was a good smelling skunk by the end of the day. But you see, something like that can hang on you. That bad attitude, and it'll rub off on somebody. And you can destroy a life that's looking for something that they so desperately need. They need somebody with salt to affect their life in a positive way. Attitude is the ear of your mind. Your attitude determines how you understand your world. Attitude is the librarian of your past and the listener of your present. A negative past experience sometimes paralyzes our thinking and our attitude. I've been done wrong. And so now my attitude is you're on trial until you prove to me you are who you say you are. I've been done wrong by so many people all my life. And what happens, folks, is those people at one time were such effective people. I've seen people that were in ministry, and they were hurt by, I don't call them Christians, I call them religious people. And so what happens? They build a wall about themselves, and they say, this is my little space in the world. I'll reach out to you on Facebook or Twitter. I'm only going to let you to my wall. I'll never let you in my wall. And everyone that tries to come in their life is screened by what happened in the past. Attitude is the voice of your heart. Your attitude will determine how you relate to those around you. It's never content until it's expressed. Your heart is more honest and more consistent than your words. Proverbs 23:7 says, as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Attitude always tells on you. It always tells how things really are. I've got to hurry along here, but how do I keep salty? How do I keep that positive attitude? The power and the positive attitude for the believer is rooted in what we think about God and His Word and how we meditate on His Word. The Bible gives us a clear direction and how we can think positively. Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 8 says, rejoice in the Lord always. I mentioned that just a few minutes ago, and I will say again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all men. The Lord is at hand. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. If we will rejoice in no matter whatever situation. You say, Tim, it's not a good situation. I understand that. But the good thing about your bad situation is that God is still with you, so I can still rejoice. Be anxious for nothing. I just got to worry about this. No, you don't. You don't have to. You choose to. But He said, lo, I am with you always. I'm never going to leave you. You're not in this fight by yourself. And the peace of God, if we will make all those things that's making us anxious, if we will make them known to Him, the peace of God will guard your heart and mind. And finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are good of a report, if there be any virtue, if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. Let me read you one more. Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. You see, if we'll keep our minds upon Christ and the principles that He has laid out in His Word, we can and we will remain effective, salty Christians and a people who are flavoring and influencing and changing lives across the aisle, across the street, and where? Around the world. You may not think it, but we're affecting lives in Cairo. You're affecting lives at your job place. Pee-wee, when you're walking Park Avenue, you're affecting lives. I saw something so touching. Karen, we were in Tennessee last month. Karen's uncle was retiring from the church that he had pastored for a long time, and he had had a couple of strokes during his rehab. One of the things that he would do, he would try to go out and walk the little outlet mall that they had. The last Saturday before he moved to Michigan, he was moving to Michigan to live with one of his children, we walked the mall with him. Actually, we was pushing him in the wheelchair. And it was astonishing because out of every one of those shops, people would come out, oh, Brother McCool, I am so sorry to hear that you're leaving us. Yeah, I'm moving to Michigan. And one girl, I'll never forget it. Old rough, tough-looking girl come up and just put a big old bear hug on Uncle Donald. She said, Brother McCool, I've never entered your church house. But she said, you being out here and your positive attitude and you not preaching to people, but just your everyday life, as you would call it, letting God shine through you, she said, you've shone all over me, and I can't just thank you enough for it. And you'd go up to the next one, oh, Brother McCool, wait a minute. He'd had a positive effect on lives of people that had never heard the man preach, but every day, wherever he was at, he affected a life. That salt that he had within him came out. It wasn't something whipped up. It wasn't something fake. It was something that was in him. And he touched the hearts and lives of people. Folks, my prayer, Psalms 51:10, create in me a clean heart, O Lord. Renew within me a steadfast spirit. Lord, I want to have a mind of Christ. and a pure heart, and help me live out my faith in an effective manner. Our attitude has the ability to change our world, and I'm going to try to wrap this up. But we have to have an attitude of love and compassion. 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 8 through 10 says, above all things, have fervent love one for another. For love will cover a multitude of sins. I'm not perfect, folks. I think you know that. But I hope you will still love me. Be hospitable to one another without grumbling. Each one has received a gift, and minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. In the mid-1980s, and I told Evan what I was going to do this morning, he said, hey, that's cool. I've preached with Billy Joel music and Bruce Springsteen. I have a variety of music I like to listen to. I find meaning in songs some people don't. So you're going to hear from Huey Lewis in the news this morning. And it's not stuck to glue like you or whatever, but in the mid-1980s, the pop icon Huey Lewis in the news recorded a song that was written by Bruce Hornsby. It was titled Climbing Jacob's Ladder, and it's not the Jacob's Ladder song that your grandmother taught you or you learned in Sunday school. Far from it. But the song coincided with a troubling time for several nationally known television ministries. Financial abuse and immorality were exposed in an embarrassing manner. Believers and non-believers alike became skeptical of ministers, the church, and their motives. The song that Huey sings tells the story of one being pursued by one such perceived ministry. He says, I met a dancer down in Birmingham. She was running from a fat man selling salvation in his hand. But now he's trying to save me. But I'm doing all right, the best that I can. I'm just a fallen angel trying to get through the night. An admission of a struggle with his life. Now you see, you didn't think you'd ever hear that in a Huey Lewis song, did you? Step by step, one by one, climbing higher and higher, step by step, rung by rung, I'm climbing Jacob's ladder. He says, coming over the airways, the man says, I'm overdue. Sing along, send me some money, and you can join the chosen few. And then his response is classic. Mister, I'm not in a hurry to make some spiritual moves in my life, but here's one thing certain. I don't want to be like you. I don't want to be like you. From what I've seen and heard from you, I don't want to be like you. And I'm no hurry to get there. All I want for tomorrow is to live better than today, was his response. Huey sang about that fat man who was selling salvation. It's not too surprising that he responded in the way that he did. I don't want to be like you, because you see, there was nothing attractive about this airwaves evangelist. The love factor was missing. If we want to be the kind of high-impact, salt and light Christians that Jesus said that we're to be, we're going to have to take some preliminary steps of self-examination and then be willing to make any needed character and attitude adjustments. Ask yourself this morning, does my attitude reflect the love of Christ? Am I honoring God and showing his love by ministering to my fellow man in the way that he had intended? Am I exhibiting that fervent love that Peter wrote about? One of the reasons why that God calls us to be compassionate and fervent in our love and mercy is because those kind of acts open up people's hearts like nothing else can. You show someone that you love them. Show them some mercy. Hey, we all receive mercy when we didn't deserve it. So how can we not spread as salt mercy to those that need it the most? How can we not love when he loved us when we were so unlovable? He loved the world so much that he came and he gave himself for us as a ransom for our sin. Are my actions drawing people to a relationship with God or pushing them further away? Think about it. Attitude. How we conduct our daily lives has implications that will reach all the way into eternity. That's a long time, folks. A very long time. We must make sure that the way we're living backs up the words we speak. And to modify that song, then when Huey said, I don't want to have anything to do with you, I've never thought about those things. Can my life be so effective? Can my attitude be one of Christ and His love so much that somebody says, you know what? I've never really given a whole lot of thought to about the hereafter. I've never given a whole lot of thought to spiritual matters. But you know what? There's something about that life right there that has drawn me, that I want to be just like them. Whatever they have, I want it. I've never thought about it, but there's something attractive in that life. Let me leave you with this. This was a letter that was written by a young lady to an older woman at a church that she started attending. She was in college and she was looking for a church to go to. And watching this lady, it kind of took her in a little bit. And after a few weeks, this young lady gave her heart to the Lord. And she wrote this letter to this woman. And this is what she wrote to her. She said, you know, when we met, I began to discover a new vulnerability and a warmth and a lack of pretense that impressed me. I saw in you a thriving spirit. No signs of internal stagnation anywhere. I could tell you were a growing person, and I liked that. I saw you had strong self-esteem, but it wasn't based on fluff or self-help books, but on something a whole lot deeper. I saw that you lived by convictions and priorities, and not just by convenience and selfish pleasure and financial gain. And I'd never met anyone like that before. I felt a depth of love and concern as you listened to me. And you didn't judge me. You tried to understand me. You sympathized and you celebrated with me. You demonstrated kindness and great generosity, and not just to me, but to other people as well. And you stood for something. Folks, you need to stand for something. Sink your roots in the ground and say, hey, I'm not moving off this. This is what I believe. This is what I stand by. This is what I know. And this is what I'm firm in this. She said, I stood for something. You're willing to go against the grain of society and follow what you believe to be true, no matter what people said and no matter how much it cost you. And for those reasons and a whole host of others, I found myself really wanting what you had. And now that I've become a Christian, I just wanted to write and tell you that I'm grateful beyond words how you lived out your Christian life in front of me. That's a testimony there, folks. I'll close with this scripture. I think I've closed about 3 times, but that's all right. You haven't complained. Nobody's thrown anything. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. How do we be salt? Therefore, be imitators of God as dear children, and walk in love as Christ also loved us and given himself for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet smelling aroma. When I walk by, I want you to smell the love of God on me. Naturally, in this old flesh, you might say he needed to use one more squirt of deodorant. But spiritually, I smell the love of God upon him. And it's made an impression upon my life. Could we bow our heads? Father, I love you. And I thank you so much that you loved us unconditionally. And Lord, I pray today that you would give us the strength to walk out our faith and to spread the salt that you have spoken about. We are the salt of the earth. Father, help us, Father, Lord, to be that you've asked us to be, that we can affect our world in a positive way. In the name of Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen.